This is Korean news for July 21, 2022. The cumulative number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Korea has surpassed 19 million. As the reinfection began in earnest, the number of new confirmed cases per day was 70,000 for the third day. The number of patients with severe cases exceeded 100 for the first time in 41 days since June 11. There were 17 deaths in one day. According to the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, KCDC, the cumulative number of confirmed cases in Korea was 19,090,080 as of midnight on the 21st. As of midnight on the same day, the number of new confirmed cases stood at 71,170. The number of new confirmed cases stood at 70,000 for the third day from the 19th. The number of people increased by 31,974 compared to the same day of the week before. In addition to the number of confirmed cases, the number of severe cases and deaths is also increasing. The number of critically ill patients in hospital is 107, an increase of 11 from the previous day. It is the first time in 41 days since the 101 cases on June 11 that the number of patients with severe cases recorded triple digits. There were 17 deaths in one day. The cumulative death toll was 24,794, and the cumulative fatality rate was 0.13%. At the end of September, the government decided to set up a 30 trillion won startup fund at the end of September to end the extension and repayment of loans to small businesses affected by COVID-19, but the financial authorities faced harsh criticism due to the debt relief controversy. Along with criticism that the principal reduction is a political decision for the sake of popularity, there are pointed out that it may encourage a moral hazard and debt insolvency as expectations for debt relief grow in the future. What a radical decision to forgive 60% to 90% of loans to bad borrowers. In the financial sector, the government's set foreclosure rate is too drastic. This is because the existing debt reconciliation system is at a level that cannot be easily obtained. The Credit Recovery Committee's debt reconciliation procedure, individual workout, has a maximum forgiveness rate of 30%. In fact, only when it is determined that the money has been withdrawn, the forgiveness of 20 to 70% is made. It is possible up to 90% for basic beneficiaries, but the overall indemnity rate is about 40% on average. Student loan delinquency forgiveness rate is up to 30%. The only way to get forgiveness of more than 90% is to become insolvent and receive immunity from bankruptcy or to go through personal rehabilitation procedures in court. Even officials at public financial corporations that guarantee loans to companies and individuals or deal with bad debts point out that considering for political purposes caused moral hazard to borrowers and loss of social trust to the public. Experts advised that the government should go through a thorough screening process in this support process in order to prevent cases of moral hazard among small business owners and self-employed people in the future. As the economy is deteriorating as the COVID-19 spread is showing signs of respreading, it is highly likely that support for small businesses and the self-employed will not be one-off, so it is important to set the right direction in the first place. As the buying sentiment for apartments is frozen, house prices in Gwangmyeong, Jaein, which have been popular as Seoul's neighborhood, are also falling. Homeowners are lowering the price of properties by hundreds of millions of won, but buyers are not moving. Since there is a large gap between the position of the seller and the buyer, it is not easy to trade. According to the real estate industry on the 21st, Mr. A, who lives in Gwangmyeong Station Prugeo, Iljikdong, Gwangmyeong Si, recently had an unpleasant experience while planning to move and putting his house for sale. Mr. A said, one of the people who came to see the house asked for a reduction of 200 million won at first. He said, I sold the house at a lower price than the surrounding market price, but it's ridiculous to see him asking so proudly, isn't he still earning a lot? There wasn't, he said. He said, the sale was in 2014. It was a time when the government was neglecting to buy a house to the extent that the government asked me to borrow it. He emphasized, the competition ratio at that time was less than 4 to 1. He continued, if the house price falls below the sale price, will you pay more to match the sale price? At a high school in Suncheon, Jeollanam-do, the vice principal and teacher have been accused of sexually harassing one after another. The vice principal in his 60s was arrested for trying to molest a female teacher in his 20s at a teacher training seminar, and a teacher in his 30s is also being investigated by the police for habitually harassing students. They were all fired at once. According to the Education Circle of Suncheon City on the 20th, Vice Principal B of High School A is accused of sexually harassing a female teacher at the same school by taking Mr. C into his room around 10 p.m. after having an after-party at a national school teacher meeting held at a hotel in Jaein, Gyeongbuk last June. Mr. C said that when her Mr. B committed her crimes, she overcame it and went out to the hallway to ask for rescue, and other school teachers who had stayed in a nearby room reported it to the police, and Mr. B was arrested as a current offender. After a month of sick leave due to psychological trauma, she returned to school. Mr. B is currently under investigation by the police and has been dismissed from his position at the school. In High School A, Teacher D, a fixed-term teacher, is being investigated for habitually touching the main body parts of male students during class. In March, second-year students reported the damage to B, but no action was taken, and as D's crimes were repeated, the students reported the incident to the school and the incident became known. There are 4 victims. The students complained, Dr. D has not only sexually assaulted him but also corporal punishment since last year. A police official said, we conducted investigations once against Vice Principal B and Teacher D. The school dismissed Mr. D from his position on the 11th and made the final decision on disciplinary action through a resolution of the Board of Directors this afternoon. An announcer who made a fuss at the hospital, such as swearing at the hospital and beating the nurse's assistant, was sentenced to a fine because he did not like the eyeliner tattoo procedure. According to the court on the 21st, Judge Lee Kwang-yeol of the Seoul Central District Court, the 23rd independent criminal judge, found a freelance female announcer guilty of recent charges of obstruction of business and assault and sentenced him to a fine of 1.5 million won. Mr. A is accused of assaulting her by shoving a nursing assistant with both her hands and striking her leg with her feet on June 24 last year because she did not like the semi-permanent eyeliner tattoo procedure she received at a plastic surgery clinic in Seoul. He is also accused of obstructing the plastic surgeon's work for about 50 minutes, such as pushing another employee with both arms and protesting loudly. According to Mr. A, she was swearing when another customer in the plastic surgery said that she would report it to the police, and she was also investigated for rioting, such as shoving the head of the hospital who appeared after her with her hand. Earlier, when Mr. A received an abbreviated order of a fine of 1.5 million won on such charges, she was dissatisfied and requested a formal trial, but the official court also sentenced him to a fine of the same amount. In relation to the so-called private hiring controversy in the presidential office of Seok-Yeol, a debate continues between Democratic Party lawmaker Ko Min-young and People's Power spokesman Park Min-young. When spokesperson Park sniped Ko, saying, "Whoever sees you, you'll think you've become a spokesperson for the Blue House through an open job," he countered, saying, they were recruited in recognition of their 14 years of broadcasting experience. On the morning of the 19th, Rep. Ko started a one-person protest in front of the presidential office, demanding an apology from the public and the sacking of the Chief of Staff and Personnel and General Affairs Secretary in relation to the controversy over the private hiring of Seok-Yeol. People's Power spokesperson Park Min-young, who saw this, said in a Facebook post, "What kind of self-denial is it when someone who has shown off or flaunted a personal relationship with the president while saying the breath of the president is taking issue with private hiring? I think he would have become a spokesperson for the Blue House." Rep. Ko said on Facebook, "I am not a relative of President Moon Jae-in, and I have never followed the president's tour as a civilian. I want to make it clear that doing water riding in this way does not clear the suspicions." Spokesperson Park mentioned the fact that comedian Kim Young-cheol was aboard the private plane of former President Moon Jae-in, who visited Germany to attend the G20 summit in July 2017. And retorted. At that time, Kim Young-cheol held a luncheon meeting for German compatriots with Rep. Ko, who was a deputy spokesperson for the Blue House. In this regard, spokesperson Park said, the Blue House invited civilians to a national event and carried a private plane. Rep. Ko Min-young, please explain this as well, he demanded. I wonder if there are other politicians as happy as Rep. Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party. Kim Dae-young, Roh Moo-hyun, and even former President Moon Jae-in did not have female supporters who shouted daddy and admired them. Although he lost the last presidential election, the pain seemed to be short-lived. As so-called dog daughters who would become his daughters flocked to the party, Lee Jae-myung escaped political responsibility, and even got a member's badge through the June by-election 3 months after losing the presidential election. According to a poll conducted by the Korea Institute for Democracy, the biggest cause of the Democratic Party's disastrous defeat in the local elections was lack of legitimacy for nominations such as Lee Jae-myung. Lee Jae-myung, who is not free from investigations into the Songnam Daejangdong development suspicion or Songnam FC illegal sponsorship allegation, is grateful for securing the privilege of not arresting a member of the National Assembly, and humbly devotes himself to his political studies. On the 17th, Lee Jae-myung declared his candidacy for the party leader at the August National Convention, saying, "It is a truly responsible act to make the Democratic Party that wins. The representative is elected by 70% of the party's Central Committee's vote, and the remaining 30% is a public opinion poll, excluding the supporters of the People's Power. It is a rule changed in Lee Jae-myung's advantage, so even if 2 out of 3 people selected in the preliminary primaries on the 28th competed with Lee Jae-myung on a one-on-one basis through unification, the expectation is high that the representative will be Lee Jae-myung anyway. If this is the case, the next presidential election in the 2000s should have already begun. Lee Jae-myung must have cast a light vote for the party's leader with the intention of taking control of the Democratic Party, which is the majority party, clearly demonstrating his parliamentary supremacy, and of not only making a nomination for the 2024 general election, but also rerunning for the 2027 presidential election with that power. He has nothing to go until 2027. In the Asoya University National Assembly, Eo Dae-myung does not envy the president. Even if there is a change of government, even if the power of the people is the ruling party that produced the president, it cannot pass a bill with only 115 seats. If the Democrats are determined, there is nothing the Democrats cannot pass. Presidential agendas such as labor reform, pension reform, education reform, etc. are likely to be difficult to pass through the National Assembly until the end of his term. A republic of the National Assembly, in which only the bills desired by the large opposition parties are passed, will be created. Jae-myung Lee and the people of the Democratic Party, who are not his real name, are worried about the division of the party, but they are afraid that the country may be divided. Lee Jae-myung's line and judgment are also worrisome. During the February presidential debate on TV, he insisted that there is a high probability that we will soon become a reserve currency country. During the June by-election, he came out with a promise to relocate Gimpo Airport and surprised even the Democratic Party. Again, there is no guarantee that these ignorant happenings of Lee Jae-myung will not be repeated. In November of last year, during his presidential candidacy, Lee Jae-myung sat down the Democratic Party's standing chairman and secretaries and even prioritized his presidential campaign like his homeroom teacher, telling him to pass his presidential campaign promises at the regular National Assembly. Even with bills that have not been agreed upon by the public, they even explicitly encouraged a legislative dictatorship, saying, "Isn't the ruling party chairman holding a bat?" Let's do what we can handle alone. One Marxist scholar feared that if he became president, he could become South Korea's Xi Jinping. He would be grateful if he could compete with the ruling party on the issue of people's livelihood. If Lee Jae-myung becomes the target of a full-scale investigation, it is questionable whether the Democratic Party will be able to focus on people's livelihoods. Even lawmaker Jo Young-cheon of the same party said, if that happens, the party's dedication to the people's livelihood itself will be considered a luxury. The prosecution, which is investigating the murder of a public official in the West Sea, summoned an official from the Korea Coast Guard, who was involved in the preparation of the expert opinion consultation results report to the effect that Lee Dae-jun was in a state of mental panic and investigated. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office's Public Investigation Division 1 summoned Mr. A on the 19th to investigate the process of collecting expert opinions on Mr. Lee's psychological state and the process of writing the advisory result report. Person A is said to have been involved in preparing a report and consulting with experts before and after the announcement of the results of the third interim investigation by the Coast Guard on October 22, 2020. At the time, the Coast Guard announced, it is judged that Mr. Lee defected to North Korea for the purpose of escaping from reality in a state of mental panic due to gambling debt. Before and after the announcement, the Coast Guard Investigative Information Bureau and Incheon Maritime Police Station were involved in collecting expert opinions and preparing the report. In order to support the Moon Jae-in administration's determination of defection to North Korea, the prosecution is said to be looking into whether officials of the Coast Guard are alleged to have abused their authority by disseminating false facts related to Mr. Lee's psychological state. Prosecutors are also expected to confirm the allegation that the Coast Guard falsified the date of the report on the report results of consultation on the possibility of North Korean defection due to internet gambling addiction written by the Coast Guard on the phone with 7 experts. On the 22nd of last month, Rep. Ha Tae-kyung and others from the People's Power visited the Coast Guard and requested to read the report. Assemblyman Ha said, when the National Human Rights Commission of Korea investigated the Coast Guard, the document that had been written, date of which it was written, was listed as October 21 and shown as October 21 is a circumstance that the record was falsified in order to avoid the investigation. Submitted and requested clarification. People's Strength claimed on the 20th that in relation to the case of the repatriation of North Korean fishermen from the time of the Moon Jae-in administration to North Korea, testimonies came out that the government's announcement that the 2 repatriated people killed 16 North Koreans was false. The People's Power held the third meeting of the National Security Disorder Investigation Task Force at the National Assembly on the afternoon of the same day and made this statement based on the testimony of North Korean defectors. This claim is in direct contradiction to the results of the investigation that the Moon Jae-in administration has officially revealed so far, so it is expected to have repercussions in connection with future prosecution investigations. The Moon Jae-in government has maintained that the 2 people repatriated to North Korea are vicious murderers. According to the testimony, the Moon Jae-in administration's announcement that 16 people were killed is false, said Rep. Han Ki-ho, the head of the task force. Assemblyman Han Ki-ho said, the 16 people decided to take the 16 people on board after one disembarked on land to escape with a squid fishing boat, but the 2 people who were arrested by the National Security Agency and remained on the squid boat learned a clue and went south right before their arrest. There, he said. According to a lawmaker, the point of the North Korean defectors' testimony was that the squid fishing boat was not originally loaded with 19 people, but only 2 people who were repatriated to North Korea. Assemblyman Han Ki-ho also said, the fact that they killed 16 people is that North Korea lied to get 2 North Korean defector brokers to be repatriated. He disappeared and I don't know where he went. Rep. Han Ki-ho said, through the testimony of residents who lived in Kimchik for about 40 days, we confirmed what happened to the 2 North Korean defectors who were repatriated to North Korea. Rumors are circulating that all of them were executed by firing squad in less than 3 days in the city of Kimchik. Rep. Han Ki-ho also added, there are testimonies that some of the families of the 5 families who tried to escape defected in advance and are currently living in the Republic of Korea. Rep. Han Ki-ho also argued for additional circumstances to the effect that the 2 repatriated North Koreans were not murderers who killed 16 people. Rep. Han Ki-ho said, the security guard is under 24-hour surveillance because it moves on a squid boat. It is absolutely not a normal fishing vessel, he said. He also said, since squid fishing takes place at night, it is a lie to say that you sleep in a cabin at night, and they say that you cannot change the fishing location arbitrarily after the captain has designated it. It is a lie to say, I summoned and killed the sleeping crew members one by one, he said. Rep. Han Ki-ho, looking at an actual photo of a squid fishing boat that North Korean defectors rode, said, they cannot change their location because they have to go to their respective locations to work. I will not leave, he reiterated. Considering the situation in which it is impossible to change seats on the ship, Assemblyman Han Ki-ho said that the investigation results of the Moon Jae-in government that 2 people repatriated to North Korea were summoned and murdered the crew members who were sleeping in the cabin raises doubts. Assemblyman Han Ki-ho said, now in North Korea, don't go to South Korea. It is said that there is a rumor among the residents that the NIS will send it back to North Korea, so it should be said that the collusion between former President Moon Jae-in and North Korea was successful. It was found that the Blue House held a countermeasures meeting presided over by then Chief of Staff No Young-min and decided to repatriate 2 North Korean fishermen to North Korea in relation to the forcible repatriation of North Korean fishermen in 2019. This was identified through an internal investigation conducted by the NIS under the Yoon Seok-Yeol administration, and it is known that this was also included in the NIS complaint against Soo-hoon, the former NIS chief. The NIS raises questions about the decision to repatriate to North Korea led by Director Roh, not a security expert, and believes that there may have been prior sympathy between Director Seo and Director Roh. According to the Blue House guidelines, the NIS judges that the former president obstructed the joint investigation of North Korean defectors and forced the preparation of false reports. On November 2, 2019, a countermeasure meeting was held at the Blue House on November 4 to decide how to deal with the new recruits of 2 North Korean fishermen aboard a North Korean defector ship seized by the Navy. Former Blue House chief No Young-min presided over the meeting, and several Blue House officials related to security in North Korea attended, and the policy of repatriation to North Korea was decided. At that time, Director Soo-hoon did not attend the meeting, and a person from the National Intelligence Service who would represent former Director Soo did not attend the meeting. The NIS found out about this through internal inspection and questioned the fact that former Chief of Staff Ro Young-min was not an expert on security in North Korea. This is because the process of recruiting North Korean defectors is decided based on the results of the Central Joint Intelligence Investigation in accordance with the Manual for Response to North Korean Ships and Personnel Found in Our Waters, which was completely revised in 2019 by the National Security Office. The NIS considers the decision to repatriate without the opinion of former Director Soo, who is the subject and responsible for the investigation, to be exceptional. The National Intelligence Service and the government took quick steps after the meeting was over. The Ministry of Unification immediately requested to share the situation of the joint investigation, and the NIS delivered the investigation report the next day, November 5. The words "no suspicion of anti-aircraft charges," which were not in the initial report, were added, while the expressions recommended for a forced investigation and defectiveness were deleted. It was also on that day that former President Moon Jae-in sent a letter of invitation to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un through the National Intelligence Service, inviting him to the special summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Busan in South Korea, and officially delivered the policy of repatriating fishermen to the north through the Ministry of Unification. It took only 3 days from the time of the capture until the intention to return the fishermen to North Korea was delivered. The joint government investigation necessary for the decision to deal with the new recruits ended on November 6, and the repatriation to North Korea took place on the 7th. It is said that the Blue House requested the Ministry of Justice to review the legal principles related to the repatriation to the north 3 hours before the repatriation. The Yoon Seok-Yeol government's National Intelligence Service conducted an internal investigation to see if there were any cases of repatriation of North Koreans who committed murder on 2 occasions, on November 1, when North Korean defectors attempted to cross the NLL, and on the 2nd, when the ship was captured. I also found out that I had inquired about it. Even before the fishermen's investigation was conducted, it was believed that they had already considered repatriation measures. Based on the results of the investigation, the NIS reported that Director Jaein had sympathized with the Blue House on the policy of forced repatriation and tried to end the joint intelligence investigation early in accordance with the Blue House guidelines, and it is reported that the investigation details were carefully included in the complaint. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office's 3rd Public Investigation Department, which is investigating the case of forcible repatriation of North Korean fishermen, is also targeting the Moon Jae-in government's National Intelligence Service as well as officials from the Blue House. In order to confirm the circumstances of the presidency of the Blue House countermeasure meeting and the contents of the discussion, this report tried to call and send text messages to Ro several times, but no contact was reached. Former Chief of Staff Ro Young-min previously told the media, "I have never presided over a countermeasure meeting on the 4th, and it is unknown whether the on-site investigation will be cancelled immediately after the meeting." President Yoon Seok-Yeol declined to respond, saying, "I don't need to mention it," about the speech of Park Hong-jae-un, the floor leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, who set the stage for mentioning the impeachment of the president. In a meeting with reporters on the way to the Yongsan presidential office on the morning of the 19th, President Yoon said, "Do I need to mention the remarks of the opposition politicians?" Earlier on the 20th, in a speech by the representatives of negotiating groups at the National Assembly, Park mentioned that the approval rating of President Yoon Seok-Yeol had fallen to the low 30% level, and said, "A third of the people who voted for Yoon Seok-Yeol in the last presidential election withdrew their support." After 2 months, the approval rating of the new government for state affairs is at the level of the lame duck at the end of the administration. Regarding President Yoon Seok-Yeol's wife Kim Kun-hee, he said, "Shouldn't it be said that the president's wife, who said she would only help out quietly, is a powerhouse that even the president can't do?" By comparison, the Yoon Seok-Yeol administration's presidential office is being criticized for being seized by the so-called Doorknobland City, a former prosecutor. When reports came out that the Justice Party, which is suffering from financial difficulties, could not even pay the salaries of its watchers, Jin Jung-kwon, a former professor at Dongyang University, posted an article asking for some support. Professor Jin said on his Facebook on the 20th, "We need to solve the problem in a way that relieves the burden on all party members. However, since the party is difficult, how about voluntarily double the party fee for those who have not paid the party fee, even if it is 5,000 won?" Professor Jin wrote, "Those who can afford it, please give some support." The Justice Party, which is suffering from financial difficulties due to continued election losses since the last general election on the 21st, requested a loan of 100 million won from lawmakers to prevent arrears in the wages of its employees this month. The Justice Party reported on the party's financial liquidity crisis at the General Assembly held the day before and asked the lawmakers for help. It is known that a total of 120 million won was personally donated by lawmakers. The Justice Party explained that it is a temporary borrowing to eliminate the liquidity crunch for about 10 days, since the date of spending on ordinary expenses, such as the payment of wages for watchers every month, is the 20th, but the settlement of income for this month is made at the end of the month. The Justice Party's debt ranges from 3.5 billion won to 3.6 billion won. The number of members of the Justice Party reached about 30,000 in 2019 based on the 6-month payment of party fees, which has the right to vote. Currently, the number has decreased by 10,000 to 20,000. The Justice Party is currently planning to relocate the company in Udo to areas with relatively low rents, such as Yeongdeungpo and Guro. Amid the 50th day of strike at the subcontractor branch of the KCTU in Jeoch, Tongyang, and Goseong, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, DSME, production staff entered a general meeting to withdraw from the Metallurgical Union. According to the shipbuilding industry on the 21st, the Daewoo Shipbuilding branch is holding a general meeting with the agenda to change the organizational structure from 6 a.m. on the same day. By 1 p.m. on the 22nd, a majority of 4,700 registered members voted, and if two-thirds or more approves, the union will be withdrawn. Upon withdrawal, the DSME will return to the corporate union after about 4 years of joining the Metallurgical Union. Earlier, about 1970 members of the Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering Association submitted signatures to the Jaein branch of the Korea Metal Workers Union to convene a general meeting to change the organizational form, but the union refused, stating that it does not allow branch units to withdraw from the group through the general meeting due to the bylaws. Accordingly, the general meeting was held with the consent of two-thirds of the number of people who signed the request for a general meeting by one member. The cause of the voices of withdrawal from the Metallurgical Union in the Daewoo Shipbuilding branch was the strike of the subcontractor branch. The subcontractor branch has been on strike for the 50th day from the 2nd of last month, and since the 22nd of last month, some members of the subcontracting branch have been illegally occupying the one-dock shipbuilding site. The members of the Daewoo Shipbuilding branch, who convened the general withdrawal meeting, believe that the Metal Union, a higher-level organization, did not play a role in the strike and occupation of the subcontractor branch. The scale of the damage is also increasing like a snowball. According to Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, the strike at the subcontractor branch is causing damages such as a one-day delay in sales of 25.9 billion won, fixed cost losses of 5.7 billion won, and delay compensation of 400 million won. Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering estimates that if the strike continues until the end of this month, the total damage will reach 816.5 billion won. Although the delay in sales can be partially compensated for through later processes, DSME explained that liquidity will inevitably deteriorate if shipbuilding advance payments and delivery payments are not received on time. Kwon Song-dong, acting representative of People's Power and floor leader Kwon Song-dong, pointed out that the cause of the recent livelihood crisis lies in politics during the 5 years of the Moon Jae-in administration. Regarding the pension reform issue, he said, "We need a great social compromise that goes beyond the cooperation between the ruling and opposition parties." Acting Kwon said in a speech by the representative of a negotiating group at the National Assembly on the morning of the 21st, politics has been holding the economy in place for the past 5 years of the Moon Jae-in administration. He also mentioned income-led growth, a sharp rise in the minimum wage, and real estate policies aimed at curbing demand, which were representative economic policies of the Moon Jae-in administration, and said, "The Moon Jae-in administration's short-sighted live only today policy and divisive policy that divides the people is the suffering of the people of the culprit." Acting Kwon said, "The pension issue has become a deterrent that threatens the future beyond generational conflict." After that, a great social compromise that goes beyond the cooperation between the ruling and opposition parties is necessary, he stressed. In order to alleviate the burden on the economy of the working class, acting authority Kwon Song-dong has implemented policies to freeze road, transportation, and postal rates until the end of this year, minimize increases in electricity and gas rates, and extend fuel tax cuts until the end of the year, alleviating economic suffering for the working class. Said he would. In the midst of a reverse money move, in which funds move from the stock market to banknotes due to the base rate hike, Hana Bank has started giving an annual interest rate of 3.8% to those who sign up for time deposits of 100 million won or more. This interest rate is higher than not only commercial banks but also savings banks. According to the financial industry on the 20th, Hana Bank started applying the 3.8% interest rate to new deposits of 100 million won or more immediately after the Bank of Korea raised the key rate by 0.5 percentage point on the 13th. However, this benefit is only provided when new funds are drawn from another financial company. The 3.8% interest rate is 0.5 percentage points higher than the 3.3% maximum interest rate for one-year term deposits at Hana Bank and 0.4 percentage points higher than the 3.4% rate of Shinyan Bank and NH Nongyeop Bank, the top 5 commercial banks. The interest rate on time deposits at savings banks is also at the highest level of 3.6%, which is considered an extraordinary interest rate in the industry. Until now, it has been customary to accept special deposits, which banks offer higher interest rates, only to corporate customers who are new customers, have not traded for a while, have resumed transactions, signed up for various products such as cards, or have entrusted large amounts of money from billions to tens of billions of dollars. However, this time, Hana Bank offers special interest rates when money is brought from other financial institutions. An official from the financial industry said, Hana Bank started a war to attract money while money was being collected in banks as each institution quickly raised the deposit interest rate. It would also be a strategy with the fact that the comparative disclosure of differences between other banks are also responding by rapidly raising deposit rates. Shinyan Bank has offered a 3.4% term deposit with a one-year maturity base rate of 3.25% plus a preferential rate of 0.15% points. The first domestic supersonic fighter KF-21 succeeded in its first flight on the 19th, making Korea the 8th country to develop supersonic fighters. As it is a fighter with advanced defense technology, it is expected to enhance the status of the Korean defense industry and help expand defense exports. According to the defense industry on the 20th, the KF-21, which succeeded in the first flight of 33 minutes the previous day, will start about 2,200 test flights by 2026. KF-21 Prototype Unit 2 will be tested in September, and Units 3 to 6 will be tested in 2023. From 2026 to 2032, about 120 units will be mass-produced and electrified. A total of 8.8 trillion won will be invested in the development of the KF-21 by 2028. It is the largest arms development and introduction project in Korea, with a total project cost of 18 trillion won, including the cost of mass-producing 120 units of 9.2 trillion won. In December 2015, Korea Aerospace Industries and the Defense Acquisition Program Administration signed a contract to develop a Korean-style fighter system, and the development began in earnest. After completing the basic design in 2018, Korea Aerospace Industries completed the detailed design in September of the same year, starting with parts processing in February 2019. In April of last year, the prototype was released, and the first flight this year was successful. The maximum payload of the KF-21 is 7,700 kilograms, the maximum speed is Mach 1.81, and the range is 2,900 kilometers. The previous day's flight was the first flight, so it was equipped with 4 model air-to-air missiles and flew at a speed of 400 kilometers per hour. It was evaluated that the safety of the first twin-engine aircraft developed by Korea was also proven because both engines produced maximum output for takeoff. Until the first flight of the KF-21 succeeded, the efforts of the domestic defense industry were great. In addition to the Korea Aerospace Industries, which was in charge of system development, about 225 domestic companies, 10 government-funded research institutes, and 15 universities participated. In particular, although it was not installed in the first flight, 4 core equipment, which was considered the biggest obstacle in the development of the KF-21, will also be mounted in the future test flight to verify the performance. These include active electronic scanning phased array AESA radar, infrared search and tracking equipment IRST, electro-optical target acquisition and tracking equipment, and electromagnetic interference equipment, which the US has refused to transfer technology. Domestic defense companies succeeded in localizing the KF-21 core equipment, which was considered impossible. The success of the KF-21 test flight is expected to have a positive impact on exports of domestic defense companies. KF-21 is not an export item as it is still in the development stage, but it can give confidence to other export items as its technological prowess is guaranteed. It is known that Poland recently tried to purchase the domestic light attack aircraft Fa-50 from Kai. When the KF-21 is deployed in 2026, the export discussion is expected to begin in earnest. So far, Korea has exported domestically made machines such as the T-50 and Fa-50 to Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, and Iraq. An official from the defense industry said, "There is still a lot of time until mass production, so it is too early to mention the export of the KF-21." It is known that the Yeolji Freedom Shield is being considered as the new name for the South Korea-US joint exercise in the second half of the year, which will be held for the first time since the inauguration of the Seok-Yeol government. Yeolji Freedom Guardian, one of the 3 major joint exercises along with Key Resolve and Eagle Training, is renamed and revived after 5 years. UFG Yeolji Freedom Guardian was abolished in 2018 after the Jaein administration took office. It is also reported that South Korea and the US have effectively agreed to jointly conduct outdoor maneuver training in this joint exercise. Combining the Donghae-Ilbo coverage on the 20th, South Korea and the US formed a consensus on the name of the joint training in the second half of the month, which will be held from the 22nd of next month to the 1st of September, as the Yeolji Freedom Guardian. The last letter of UFG, which was abolished by the previous Jaein administration, was partially changed to Shield, but it was actually inherited. A government source said, including the term alliance or using the existing UFG name has been discussed, but in the end, the atmosphere is that UFS is suitable. Earlier, the Jaein government abolished all 3 existing joint exercises and drastically reduced the size of the exercises. This reflects the trend of denuclearization negotiations with North Korea in 2018. However, while restoring the name of the training this time, South Korea and the US decided to conduct an outdoor maneuver training as well. The joint training in August was usually conducted with computer simulations, but now it is said that they will even conduct outdoor maneuvering training to increase the training effect. Earlier, in a joint statement in May, the leaders of the United States and South Korea had agreed to initiate consultations to expand the scope and scale of joint exercises in consideration of the evolving threat from North Korea. USFK responded to an inquiry from the Donghae-Ilbo regarding the new name of the joint exercise, saying, as a policy point, it does not publicly comment on the planned or implemented joint exercise, but all decisions regarding the joint exercise will be made by the ROK-U.S alliance. Emphasized. The South Korea U.S government's strong review of the UFS Yeolji Freedom Shield as a new name for the joint exercise in the second half of next month reflects the Seok-Yeol administration's will to normalize the joint exercises that were reduced due to denuclearization negotiations under the previous Jaein administration. UFS has the meaning of transforming and succeeding the UFG Yeolji Freedom Guardian training conducted every August from 2009 to 2017. The ROK and the US reviewed the joint exercise in August, which had been conducted only through computer simulations, in parallel with the outdoor maneuvering exercise to ensure the effectiveness of the exercise, while simultaneously strengthening the combined defense posture of the 2 countries against the North Korean nuclear and missile threats that the 7th nuclear test is imminent. Analysts say it is a symbolic measure to strengthen. According to the Donghae-Ilbo coverage on the 20th, South Korea and the US plan to conduct outdoor maneuvering exercises during this joint training period to the extent possible in consideration of the current circumstances. A government source said, in the case of large-scale maneuver training at the regimental level or higher, it will be realistically difficult because it requires at least half a year of preparation. The source said, the fact that the field training itself means that the all-level joint exercises will be revived one after another, said the source. This combined exercise will start with the Crisis Management Staff Training CMST, which is a pre-rehearsal on the 16th to 19th of next month, and will be held in Part 1 from the 22nd to the 26th and Part 2 from the 29th to September 1st. The outdoor maneuver training can be performed in parallel with the existing computer simulation training during the entire period, and is expected to be conducted if necessary. However, there is a possibility that the scale of outdoor maneuver training may be affected by environmental factors such as the recent respreading of Corona-19 in Korea and the size of reinforcements arriving from the U.S. mainland. Earlier in 2018, the Moon Jae-in administration suspended the UFG scheduled to be conducted in August of that year as the North Korea-US and North-South dialogues entered the phase of dialogue. In the first half of the same year, the name of the combined exercise was changed to Allied Exercise, but as North Korea protested, from the second half of the same year, the name of the exercise was changed back to ROKU's Combined Command Post Exercise instead of Alliance Exercise and has been used until now. The Moon Jae-in administration not only changed the name of the training, but also reduced the scale of the outdoor maneuver training to a small scale below the battalion level. As a result, the deployment of U.S. strategic assets and joint maneuver exercises on a regimental scale disappeared from the Korean peninsula. ROK and U.S. military authorities have been concerned about the situation in the meantime, as former USFK Commander Robert Abrams, who retired last year, was known to have responded to the training principle by saying, "It would be difficult if training became a computer game." The UFG, which was held until 2017, was usually conducted only with computer simulations without field maneuver training, but 60,000 to 80,000 ROK and U.S. soldiers have participated every year, including 2,000 to 3,000 reinforcements deployed from the U.S. mainland. In August 2017, the last UFG, 3 key U.S. military leaders, including the Pacific Commander, Strategic Commander and Director of the Missile Defense Agency, visited South Korea to hold a joint press conference and issue a warning message to North Korea. However, the UFG was eventually scrapped, and it is reported that the number of U.S. reinforcements sent to the ROK-US joint exercises was only a few hundred. As the UFG is effectively revived as a UFS this time, the size of the U.S. reinforcements is expected to increase. There are also observations from inside and outside the military that additional measures by the ROK and U.S. authorities to maximize deterrence against North Korea will follow, such as the deployment of U.S. strategic assets to the Korean peninsula with this exercise as an opportunity. The Japanese government is considering a plan to hold the Director General of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at the Budokan in Tokyo on September 27. According to NHK and others on the 20th, the Japanese government will hold a cabinet meeting on the 22nd to determine the location and time of former Prime Minister Abe's director. If the director is decided, he will become the second director after the defeat in World War II after former Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida in 1967. In Japan, the death of a former Prime Minister is usually held at the joint head of the government LDP. However, given that former Prime Minister Abe served as the longest-serving Prime Minister in history and his death was a shocking assassination, it is known that the director will be officially decided in the form of accepting the wishes of the bereaved family. When former Prime Minister Abe's Director General is held, a large number of foreign condolences are expected to attend. The South Korean government is planning to form a condolence group composed of Prime Minister Han Deok-soo and National Assembly Vice Chairman Jang Jin-sok and send them to Japan. Thank you for watching today. Please like and subscribe.